Hello, everybody. Super excited to call.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everybody. Super excited to call our meeting to order. We're going to start with the roll call. Would you mind calling the roll?
You're starting.
You're starting now. Okay.
Would you mind calling?
Yep. So, Bill Newman,
Here.
Felicia Lundquist,
Present.
Garrick Perry is not with us. Is Jeremy Baker Paquette with us yet? Nope. I am here. Maurice Elkins, Marcia Morris.
Here.
Usman Power Green,
Here.
Renika Montgomery Tomaclo,
Here.
Sarah Lynn Patterson,
Here.
Rachel Naismith.
Here.
Excellent. Super
Chairs,
excited.
you have a quorum.
Oh, woohoo. Super excited to be here. As always, this is a really exciting month, and just to be on planet Earth, the weather is changing, people are getting out, and I think that we have a lot of news and updates to share today. So I wanted to start with some updates on reparations-themed items of interest. And I feel like all of us have been really active in some way, and I'm happy to start with some of the things that come to mind for me. For one, we know that the city is rigorously engaged in a school budget debate, and I think that it really begs the question for us to talk about and sustain an energy of encouragement around asking for an allotment for this project at the end of its term. And it just occurred to me that I think, in the sense that there are a lot of different needs that the municipality has to engage, we want to make sure we feel really strongly and confidently when we're going up, right, to have conversations with City Council and the mayor. And I actually thought it was an amazing show of engagement that was surrounding the school budget talks. And I just wanted to commend our counselors for the work that they do in mediating really the challenges of giving people what they want in our city. But the whole point of me mentioning that is to say that we should be really firm and confident in what we're asking for, and the more that we build our materials, I think that we're going to feel super confident about our requests. I think it was also pertinent to mention that Evanston, Illinois has a really awesome housing voucher reparations project. However, it has come under public scrutiny and it has been sued. The program has been sued, and I think this brings to bear the framework that we have, which is to produce 3 different types of lists, which we'll talk about later. One list needs to accommodate the state of the law. There's no reason I think we should launch Northampton into some expected lawsuit down the road by not tailoring this plan for the present and then tailoring it for the sort of political environment that we hope will happen with special legislation at the state level. So I thought that was a super important piece of news. There's been a lot of activity from other members of our group, and I wanted to ask Usman to talk a little bit about the David Ruggles Center tour that the group went on this past weekend.
Yeah, I don't mind sort of starting, and maybe some of the others. We had a nice group of commissioners, Bill, Marcia, and Rachel, who had an opportunity to go over to the David Ruggles Center in Florence and sort of learn about the history work they're doing and they have been doing, and to think about ways in which the research and work that they're doing could really support the work that we're doing. And so we had a great opportunity to sort of, to me, I guess, begin a one of perhaps more conversations with folk over there, and also thinking about the ways in which the work that entities, organizations, institutions in Northampton that are doing work that overlap with our work, will be beneficial for the next phase, right? Obviously, when we give recommendations to the council and the mayor, seeing these partnerships is important and enduring. So, but yeah, others who were there, Marcia, Bill, other takeaways from our visit?
There are, it was a really good visit, and we got to know a lot about what they have there and what they're doing, and see their library, which was impressive, I thought. And they're willing to help us in any way that they can, which was really nice. So I thought it was a really good visit.
Any other updates on reparations-themed things that are happening that come to mind for anyone? No? Oh.
Sure. Good afternoon, or good evening, I should say, everybody. Marcia Morris, and we've had meetings, ongoing meetings, and we're looking at a couple of different things. One is Jeremy, I've been working with the high school to talk with the young people about what specifically they were interested in. And I showed you the agenda the last time I was here for the work that I went over, and met with them and talked with them. And then Jeremy has been working on pulling together the young people to come to the meeting tonight, and then another teacher to talk about what happened at the middle school. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy, and it's been great working with you, Jeremy, and I'll let you take it from here.
Just a second, we're on this particular update section. So was this our last update?
No. I have one more update.
We'll have just one more update, and then,
I have an update. You have an update?
yeah, we're going to keep just a few more minutes. I'm so sorry, Marcia.
Just one quick update. We have been in conversation with the members of the Documenting Black Lives in the Valley Project, and there's been an effort to have an intern do some research for us. We had a person that was almost able to have that happen. It didn't work out. But folk over at the project, UMass Public History Program, are trying to see if we could find an intern that would be able to do some research for this summer. So the subgroup that's been talking about public engagement, I've had a chance to sort of talk more about that. But I'm fingers crossed that we work out where we have someone who's working in the Public History Program and who can aid us over. I met with Dylan over at Forbes Library. He's excited about the idea of having someone work with him. So just thought I would update everybody and let everyone know that that's sort of in the works, and obviously it'll benefit us enormously to have a person to do some work for us over there, to also support the work that they're seeing themselves doing when they, as members of the Public History Program, and also Documenting Black Lives Project. So yeah, Rachel, what about you?
I just want to
Go ahead, respond to that. Mm-hmm.
So if there's project history going on, 19th century, early 20th century, folks should check in with me, because that's the period that I've been working on since August of last year. So I've been going to the libraries and the museums and doing, which I've been talking about extensively for this time, and the draft is coming to bear. So we wouldn't want anyone to independently take on a project that hasn't been articulated to the extent that we can say, oh, we've already done that, right? So as long as, we have some like write-up, like this is what I expect, or this is what I thought I could contribute, then I think that would be more useful than to let people go for it and then give us things that they think will then automatically appear in the report, which just might have been reinventing the wheel. So just sort of asking maybe them to do a write-up to tell you what they want to do, and then we can share it and see if that has potentially already been done.
Yeah, just to be clear, this individual will be like our researcher, your research assistant. So they wouldn't be doing independent work. They would be, when you'd ask a question, they would be doing the research for you, like literally like a research assistant. So there's no like agenda that they would have. They'd say, Sarah, what do you want me to go spend time in the stacks researching?
That would be much better. Thank you.
Oh, that's literally what I meant. I'm sorry for not being clear, articulated.
Yeah, no, and I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Just to add to that, I also I put an email into the mayor's office trying to find out if there's summer jobs money available, and I wasn't sure if summer jobs runs through Northampton, and I'm waiting to find out about that. I don't know if somebody knows that, and also pushing for the information having to do with our administrative assistant. Where is that money, and what's happening with that job so that we can get that filled. And trying to find summer jobs money to see if we could get a researcher to look into some of the ordinances. The legal team, Marissa, myself, and Bill were talking about what is possible in terms of what might have come up. I went to the African American Museum, and after the Reconstruction and during Jim Crow, those Jim Crow laws, although I don't know that it's called Jim Crow in the North, span from one end of the country, California, to the other end of the country, Massachusetts. So interracial marriage was stopped again, I believe in 1923, something like that. And, you know, if you read all the ordinances that happened, it's shocking actually to see what America used to look like. So it's important that we look at that both at the state level for Massachusetts and at the Northampton level, because that's one place where the state would have jurisdiction, but it would impact Northampton. So just to add that to the mix. So that's it for community engagement. Is there anything, Rachel, that you want to speak to?
Yeah, I also had one thing. So I had we have mentioned in the past the Stolen Beam series, which was 4 or 5 sessions on reparations, anti-slavery movements, reparations movements of the past and the present and the future. So I called Jeffrey Gold, and he was one of the people who was running it. And he said it is going to be run again this fall at Forbes Library. But I said, would it ever be possible? We have really busy people on this commission. Would it ever be possible to do a one session, like an hour and a half, and just cull it down, maybe in the fall, because summer's here and, you know, we're going to have some vacations coming. And he said, yeah, he would, if we are interested, and I'd like to bring this up in August. I said I'd get back to him. If we are interested in this, he would love to have a discussion, not a lecture, with the commissioners about anti-slavery movements, reparations movements, how to talk about race, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to mention that.
What's the name again?
His name is Jeffrey Gold, G-O-L-D.
And what is he? Is he independent or he's associated?
He and another person are the ones who have done multiple presentations of this series, but I don't know anything.
Okay.
Stolen Beam. I don't know anything more about what he does for a living.
But you have his contact info.
I do.
And stuff. Okay, yeah.
And I told him I'd call him later this summer.
Okay, great. Oh, later this summer. That's
Yeah.
terrific. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since we're doing updates, so I can tell folks that Bill and Marcia and I met to talk about, as Marcia mentioned, legal stuff. In particular, we are, Bill was pretty instrumental in this, and actually Alan Seawald in the solicitor's office. We have gotten the legal memo that was drafted for the Amherst Reparations Commission. Bill and I feel like there's a need to update that memo in light of more recent Supreme Court jurisprudence, which will go to that discussion that you were talking about, Sarah, about what is feasible and what's within the law. So we are talking about that to update that. Also, we did talk about that that a review, and actually, now that I think about it, a review of city ordinances for racial implications and things like that would be a good project for somebody to work on, perhaps a student. The other thing, though, that I'm just remembering is that a few years ago, council adopted a resolution to review ordinances, and I think some counselors did some pretty significant work on that. So it truly just occurred to me that we may have a head start on some of that. So those are the couple of things that I felt like were in my wheelhouse as a lawyer, and that we talked about, and I'm hoping to work with folks on as the summer goes on.
And one other suggestion in that regard is going to be that when we come to our recommendations, that we could add to it a sentence or two on what we think the legal feasibility of the recommendation is. And I personally think that near the beginning of this report, we need to have a analysis of what we do think is legally possible. The Amherst opinion focuses on the anti-aid amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution, and it is something I hadn't thought a lot about since I hadn't read it as thoroughly as I should have. It's an appendix to the Amherst report, but it really indicates serious restrictions on what can be done in terms of reparations. There are 3 suggestions on basically how to get around it. The last one of which is the most significant, and the last one of which I think is probably impossible in light of the subsequent Supreme Court decisions. So I think it's really important that we do something up front of what we think is legally possible. And I'm not saying we have to decide that now, but we need to do that. And the request, of course, has been, does Amherst have an update on its policies? Because Amherst has specific suggestions on one things it could do with the legislature, which I'm not at all clear is actually legally possible anymore. So anyway, I think we should do that. We should be clear with the city and clear with our constituencies and clear with all of the people who are concerned about this of what's possible, because everything else is kind of academic in some ways. I'm not saying nothing is possible. I think quite a bit is possible, but not as much as was possible before the Supreme Court decided the 2 higher education cases this term. Would you?
I just want to point out that that case is about the affirmative action, and that is a policy that I believe was put into effect under the first George Bush administration as a way to alleviate some of the, what would have been, that he was considering harms to African Americans, or at the time I think people were being called black or Afro-Americans. I think it was black by that time. But I just want to keep reminding us that that was a policy, that was never a law.
So, Jeremy, do you have an update? I really want to actually stop and say, could you also tell us a little bit about Mary Ogilvie?
Yeah, Mary Olberding. I'd be happy to. Mary Olberding sends her apologies. As in the world of good excuses of having to cancel late, she said, I just learned that my son is going to receive an award at the convocation at the high school in front of all of the students and parents tonight, so she couldn't be here. She's done amazing work for us. And I think it's probably worth spending a minute or two anyway on what she has found so far, the bit of work that's still to be done by the Registry of Deeds, and what I think she will plan to do with what she has found already. So she has or will have looked at all of the deeds, residential deeds in Northampton between 1865 and 1947, which is the year, and maybe some after that as well, to bring certain deeds up to date. So here's the overview. I think this is interesting. There is one deed from 1924 that prohibits Polish, Lithuanians, and Hebrews from living or buying this property. There's just one. That said, there are 38 deeds that come out of a certain tract of land that says these premises shall not be sold to or occupied by any colored persons. There are some 13 deeds and some 20 additional deeds that say that they are subject to restrictions of record. This means that prior restrictions not referenced specifically in a deed actually incorporate restrictions in a previous deed. So they are equally racist deeds, they just don't say it quite as obviously. What is still to be done is to see what has happened with streets off of Jackson Street that were developed after Charles Sauter, who created and whose heirs continue to create the restrictive covenants based on race. Again, so there's at least 3 dozen, probably considerably more than that, when the registry is still determining how many additional properties had those restrictions. There's another series that came out of this development, well, development, I'm using the word a little loosely, and that is an additional 30 deeds or so that have this restriction. Only persons or class of persons whose ownership or occupancy would be injurious to this locality for residential purposes may be sold this property.
Wait, on purpose?
Persons or class of persons whose ownership or occupancy would be injurious to this locality for residential purposes are prohibited from owning the property. And there are still 10 deeds in Northampton that have this problematic language. So, in sum, there are up to some 40 deeds at present that may and would violate the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and to which the Register of Deeds will turn her attention. Looking at these deeds has really been educational for me, and seeing what the work that the Register has done to bring these deeds forward so that we can understand when it happened and how long it has gone on for. There are 2 deeds that specifically caught my attention because it raises for me the issue of, writ large, the institutional racism in Northampton, and the institutions in Northampton that I think have the wherewithal to be helpful with regard to reparations because of their financial abilities, and because they're private institutions, they can take actions and make contributions that the city of Northampton, in my judgment, can't do. So, there are 2 deeds here, at least, the 2 that I've seen that were provided by the Register of Deeds, that were deeds that came out of foreclosures. And those 2 foreclosure deeds contain within them the same racially restrictive covenant language that existed when they took the properties and foreclosed on them. And those 2 banks, I believe, have their successors in institutions in Northampton that still exist, to be sure, much larger financial institutions that have subsumed any number of other banks along the way, but their successors still exist here in this town. And it was news to me that banks in Northampton had deeded out deeds with racially restrictive covenants. So I think that is of some significance, and one thing that I will suggest when we're writing our report is that we ask those institutions to examine this phenomenon more closely and report to the city, in the same way that I think we should ask Smith College to do exactly the same thing. We're not going to have the time or the expertise in this commission to, I think, fully examine all the various ways in which Smith College may, I'm not making accusations, but may have had racially restrictive or injurious policies or practices that should be looked at, and I think fall within the jurisdiction of this commission. Smith should be asked to do this, and I think that along with the banks, we should ask them to look, because they're going to have records that won't be necessarily easily available to us, including mortgages, which are not necessarily matters of public record. So, in terms of what is going to happen with regard to this examination of the deeds in Northampton, there is still some additional work to be done. Mary Olberding is more than willing to meet with this body. She's happy to do it. She's not going to be here the first week in July. She will be off the first and second week, but she is happy to meet with us to go over this in detail, and I think that's a fair summary of what's happened since we last met.
Really,
Really good work, Bill.
yeah, just really, really excellent.
It's for Mary. She did the work. Her staff did the work. And
The idea, so that was great.
and somewhere in the thank yous in this report, we thank the registrar and her staff.
Absolutely. I think hands down, Northampton is one of the most progressive cities I've ever known, the most progressive city I've ever lived in, not only because they allowed us to establish this and that it was mostly white folks, right, who signed the petition to establish it, but that the city itself is going and digging for racism. Same thing with St. John's Church is digging on purpose for racism. No one's forcing them to. And I think you're right. We should send a letter to Smith and ask them to look into their own policies. And I'm happy to circulate a draft or nudge you to start a draft for that and for the bank as well. I actually think that this is a really terrific time for us to segue into a conversation that allows us to pull the experts in the room into the conversation. I would like to acknowledge two speakers. They are already on the agenda that I had hoped to produce for this, but I think we're going to have to vote to allow them to be speaking guests. And the first of which is Professor Almakar Shabazz. He is the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of Afro-American Studies professor at University of Massachusetts Amherst. He's also a former commissioner for the town of Amherst's African Heritage Reparations Assembly. And we also have Michelle Miller here, who was the chair of the town of Amherst's African Heritage Reparations Assembly. I would like to acknowledge both of them as speakers. Yes, Marcia? Sorry.
The young people are here.
Right, and so we have a conversation happening that needs to move forward, and we will have a space for the young people to have a speaking session in the second part of the meeting. But we're having a conversation. I think we should bring the experts into the conversation. So can I have a second?
Second?
That you moved to recognize, yep.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's strictly necessary, but
Oh, it's not, you don't think it's necessary? All right.
somebody could object, though. That would be okay.
So I wanted to ask our speakers to be involved in our conversation because to follow up on what Jim has mentioned, I seem to have a sense of three ways that we can perform reparations outside of illegality. The first is, as I've mentioned before, to harness the spirit of the Black experience, focusing on the fact that what we have shown so far is proof that Black people since the beginning of slavery have never achieved an equal standing at the level of collective demographic population with white Americans. And that gives us a trajectory of disadvantage that suggests that the city should take on policies and initiatives that overwhelmingly help anyone who has experienced a state of disadvantage. And while we will focus on the Black experience to guide how we choose those initiatives and policies, there is an open beneficiaries framework that does not exclude anyone, right? So that seemed to me to be what we're doing and the best method of avoiding illegality. The second method was through charitable action that was purposeful, intentional, and voluntary from the community. That was the second one. I think that was outlined in their report. And then the third one was to ask or to write a grant that specifically allowed you to use money for Black people only. So those seem to be the three frameworks, and I wanted to invite Shabazz and Michelle to speak with us and give us a sense of a response to these things.
Well, thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak on these matters and just to address you and to salute you in the work that you all are doing. The question of legality has come up for us in Amherst, and a second legal opinion was sought and recently came in. Co-Chair Miller, my co-chair, Michelle Miller, said she might not be able to link in to the meeting. She is listening, but if she's able to, then she can alert us to that. But otherwise, she wanted us to, particularly to know that she is working on a meeting that we would love to have this commission be a part of jointly with ourselves, since it is addressing the same questions of legality and legal framework that you all are essentially addressing as well. This is being set up with Robin Ruth Simmons, the director of First Repair in Evanston, Illinois, and person who spearheaded the work in Evanston. They're very tied in to these legal questions. First Repair is looking at it all across the country. And so they have a lead person on their legal team would join her in a Zoom meeting with us and as many members of you. The person with Robin would be Attorney Nick Cummings, the town of Evanston, city of Evanston's former lawyer, the person who spearheaded legal aspects of their reparations program. So we can get you the details. Michelle can certainly provide, as this meeting is set up, the information to all of you, and hopefully this is something we can do together and learn from together. This would address both the question of how to proceed within the legal framework that the attorneys we've consulted in Massachusetts have looked at it, along with the opinions of the folks in Evanston who are looking at this nationwide, and also ourselves being able to absorb that information as we press forward. As far as the specific three items mentioned here, first, we are also trying to get a win this year in 2024 in Amherst on what we might call symbolic reparations, internal reparations, reparations involving things like a street renaming or other kinds of ways in the landscape, in the built environment, in the narrative of the city that we can acknowledge, celebrate, and build the Afro-American presence, the African-American presence in the town of Amherst. So that is certainly one consistent with our experience and what we're moving forward on. Also, the question of charitable activity or the formation of some type of community land trust, some type of nonprofit trust or foundation. We've met with the folks from the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts. We've met with people at the annual Reparations Summits in Evanston that have also set up community foundations or work with community foundations who are there to on the reparative justice work and figuring out ways to get the money into the hands of people who need it and who are deserving of it from the harms that we have investigated, we are investigating. So that is certainly, again, an area consistent with what we are looking into. It is certainly one that one can pursue. We ought to all be pursuing together in ways that can really amplify this work, build this work, and so we're very much consistent with the second item. As far as third or any others, the real thing is, yes, there is room to do things, and those can certainly be ought to be prioritized along with. How do we figure out how to move with direct cash payments or with other kinds of things that might fall into this zone of being legally challenged, which again we may want to avoid it, but it's bound to happen. That's our court system. That's our great legal system. We are able to contest. There are obviously people who contest reparations. And so I don't think we can shirk from there will be a lawsuit or there will be a legal challenge to what we do. We wouldn't wouldn't do anything if that was the case. So the key thing is how to find the pathway. Is there a pathway, given our Constitution, given the Commonwealth of Mass Law in respect of all of this, is there a pathway to do it that immunizes us as much as possible from legal challenge is I think, the real critical question, and one, again, that I hope we can work together on.
And I think the street naming seems to be a perfect case study in this, right? So if we want to change a street name, and it's changed because we have a sense of the enormous wrongs that were perpetrated against Black people, and the city uses $2,000 to replace the street sign, right? Is that reparations? And we would probably say yes, right? That's what we're thinking. But the other side of that, Marcia's saying it's not reparations, but that's something we're asking for. And the other side of that is, can someone then sue the city for having the motivation to change that sign because of repair? But if you look at it from another perspective, was it white supremacy that drove the city to put white people on street signs here? Is that not an act of racism already? So I think we have arguments we can make. The question is, will the courts of Massachusetts respect our logic, which is not going to be the logic of the state, because the state hasn't had sound racially equal logic. I think we can all agree. And so I appreciate what you're saying in return, is that, like, no, we should actually want the fight if it comes to it. Because, like I said, cash payments is one sort of realm of things, but okay, someone could sue about $2,000 on a street sign under these same circumstances that we seem to be hearing about. And so, in that sense, I think we should move forward with things like this. I think Marcia wanted to respond. We can't hear you, Marcia.
I had a question for the Professor Shabazz. Is it?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
I asked Bill, and I'll ask you the same question. Why has there never, to this point, there's never been a direct court fight or court fight about reparations? Why, during Reconstruction, there were certain things that were promised and they did not happen? Do you have any sense of why that is? Why there's never been a court case that actually takes on the issue of reparations for descendants of African Americans?
Yes. I can take the opportunity to plug a little book, not because I get any sales from it, but a little book that I happened to put together in 1994, helped to put together, that brought out the President Andrew Johnson's rationale for vetoing the Freedmen's Bureau bill when it had come up for extension, for renewal. Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated. Johnson brought in a much more pro-South, let's get white supremacy back together, reunion kind of position, and he said no to the Freedmen's Bureau bill. And they said,
why didn't anybody challenge it?
And it was challenged, and it was even overturned. But his rationale is what I want to get at. His rationale was then, that carried on all the way down, is that in America we never give anybody any help if they've been done wrong. As a country, we just don't do that. You can read his own words, but his argument is you have to just pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Nobody, we're not going to give the formerly enslaved African Americans any kind of help, leg up, nothing. They either sink or swim. This is America. Now, that was a position that was taken, but people overturned it. And the Freedmen's Bureau did get some additional funding. But I raise it to say the mindset, The mindset is what has triumphed. And it triumphed clearly by 1877, when North and South got back together, said, let's remove the troops, let's have reunion, let's get on with the business of a united white America that doesn't give one fig and will not give 1 cent to the formerly enslaved people of African descent. Let's get on with it. And that's where we've been, straight down from Andrew Johnson's veto, 1877, the compromise, straight down to now. What are we doing in Amherst? What are we doing in Northampton to change that?
But why wasn't that challenged after the Japanese people were made whole after World War II?
Exactly. Exactly. As I think you're so right. Why didn't people rise up and say, hey, wait a minute, why are we doing this for the victims of internment in World War II? That's done. There's no, you're exactly right. And that's the way we have to make the counter argument, is what I would respectfully agree with.
I'm big on definitions. I'm big on words. Scapegoat is in the dictionary for a reason. There are terms that exist that describe this, and it makes us so deeply uncomfortable to say, no, African Americans have been the primary scapegoat of America's ills, their wrongs, and the injustices. We have, and we can also say the natives were right there alongside us in terms of comparability. I have raised again the fact that Massachusetts bureaucrats were the ones that came up with the Freedmen's Bureau, wrote the initial bill, which meant that they did it with full awareness that issues of enslavement had survived 1783, even in the North. Slaves show up in the 1840 census for Hampshire County in the 1840s. So this idea, we already know Sojourner Truth's son was sold into slavery deep in Alabama after he was freed in 1827, right, when a gradual emancipation supposedly freed everyone. So this idea about dates signifying actual freedom is not true. And then, of course, the terms of a caste system that has survived has put Black Northamptonites in the predicament that I mentioned before, which is our primary framework of justification. This community has never achieved an equal standing with white Americans as collective bodies. And then I can also mention just really quickly, how did this happen, Marcia? Immigration, right? Foreign immigrants coming into America from Europe and in large numbers overwhelmed and overshadowed the needs of Black Americans, and it was purposeful. They were trying to outnumber us to make sure we could never be a viable demographic or bloc in this country. We have unfortunately been chosen to be the mules of this nation, and to do its brunt work and to not complain. And now this reparations movement is saying we can go toe-to-toe with any intelligent person with example after example after example of racism that has happened in the past and that continues to survive today. So why won't they let us have reparations, right? Like, the onus is going to be put on the court system to answer this question eventually. And he's motivating me more than I thought I could be motivated, because I really want to be like I want to remain in the legal frameworks of what we're doing. Go for it.
I agree with you with what you said, and I still think that reparations were done. There was one case of reparations that I saw and the first one was in Massachusetts, so we know it's possible. But the question to me is, why didn't we do anything after the whole situation with the Japanese folks, but I think it goes deeper than that. And I think you hit on it, which is that tight caste system that they want to have in America. And we happen to be the easiest, and it's built on race. In other countries, it's built on, in World War II, it's built on Jews' backs. So, and then of course in India, it's built on the untouchables. So we just have to really look at that and be able to describe that, I think, in a clear way, and then demonstrate the places where reparations has been done to rectify harm. I don't agree that just looking toward policy is the way to do that. And affirmative action is a policy. It is not. It was never put into law. So I just want to be clear why those two things don't match up in my mind, but that's just me. So I agree with you, Sarah, wholeheartedly on that, and thank you, Professor Shabazz.
Go for it.
Two things, just to be practical. One thing that Professor Shabazz said is he had offered for us to join in a conversation with Evanston's lawyers, along with the Amherst African American Assembly or the Reparations Commission. I like us to approve that idea, and that it be set up at the first convenient opportunity, and that we authorize and request Professor Shabazz to make that happen. So I don't know if we need to do that formally or just by a sense of the meeting, but we should take that step here today, I think.
Yes, I agree.
And that should sit in the legal study group, because that's what we're looking at, those issues.
I don't know that it's something that needs to sit anywhere. We can agree to participate, and whoever wants to go and participate.
He's gonna send it to me or to Usman and me, and we'll circulate it. I go ahead.
Yeah, and I one other thing to say, because much as I love Professor Milka Shabazz, I want to offer one caution here. And it's something that those of us who are worried about law reform efforts and how they will be received by the courts think about a lot. And it really goes back to the Hippocratic Oath, which is do no harm. And it would be possible to create a wonderful reparations program that, when all was said and done, runs the enormous risk of setting back the reparations movement very significantly through an adverse court decision. So saying, well, to the ramparts, here we go, it sounds great until you're reading some decision that makes you want to throw up. So, a caution.
Speaking of, I think that this is a really good time for us to move through at least one of the lists, and then I would like for Shabazz and Michelle to be able to advise us also on the idea of using a poll and a survey, and I also wanted to introduce the idea of a citywide referendum that I think could be a really interesting way to get the entire community involved. I did create a draft of that, which would, for example, put 3 questions to the larger community. The first question would be actually, which street should we rename to Sojourner Truth Avenue? Go for it.
Yeah. So my suggestion is, because of its obvious resonance, I think we should call it Sojourner Truth Way. And I think it should be a major thoroughfare, and I'd love to see it be Route 9 from Northampton to Florence.
Oh, that's nice.
That's what I think.
And that was my sense, is that we could have a few options and allow people to pick from them or write in, and then we would ask them if they agree that reparative action is necessary through means that are not exclusive to racial affiliation, which would be to say what we want to do in the first list. Like, do you agree that we should take steps for repair? Go for it.
Yeah, and let me say, I think that we can get lost in some theoretical things pretty easily, but from my point of view, there's no problem with renaming straight street names. And the motivation of the city to rename the street names is irrelevant. No one's going to get challenged on that. It's not a question of misuse of city funds to rename a street. What they're talking about in terms of funding is racial preferences in giving direct benefits. And that's what the Supreme Court ruled unconstitutional not very many months ago. So renaming the street, and that's why I go back to what I said earlier, which is I think that we can say after each suggestion we make how we evaluate the legal impediments or not to such a suggestion, and I think that would be worthwhile. It would be something that would be an add-on to what happened with the Amherst report, and I think we should do it.
So maybe, can I share my screen? Can you give me?
Yes, and I have to go.
Oh, okay.
So I'll make you a co-host, and then I will.
So the idea of a referendum would offer people a chance to get involved in the street naming question. It would ask them to approve what we're doing at the level that we don't think we need legislation to do, right? Just using the spirit of the Black community to guide some of the recommendations that we make. And then the third question would ask people bluntly, do you think the state of Massachusetts should pass special legislation to allow the use of public funds for specific racialized beneficiaries? Or do you agree that the Massachusetts legislature should pass special legislation that will allow the city of Northampton to use public funds for a specific amount to be paid to individual beneficiaries who are historically descended from Northampton's enslaved people or that are current residents of Black and African American heritage? I say let's just put it out there. Just ask the community, would you be okay with that? I mean, you could say, no, this could not be a thing we do. But if you asked it and they actually said yes, then at least we would have the weight of a city referendum to take, perhaps. Yeah, just putting it out there.
Yeah, you have to be prepared that the voters say no, though.
For me, would not be a problem. I don't think any of us have raised direct payments even as a goal. No one has said, I want to pay every Black person $500. Nobody said that. So if they say no, would it be the worst thing? Sorry.
I have to go, so.
We have said that actually at the beginning of our talks. We did say that.
Say what?
At the very beginning of our talks, we talked about reparations in terms of money. Now, we never said you'll get 3,000, you'll get 2,000, nothing like that. But we did say that as a possibility. And
Okay.
that should stay on the table.
Okay. All right. That's definitely something to think about. Shabazz, you wanted to?
So I just wanted to offer as a observation, there are surveys, there are polls, there are referenda. And in the case of Amherst, we went with a survey. And it's not to say some kind of referendum may materialize down the line, but that isn't anything our commission, our group, our assembly recommended, having to do with a number of things. One is, what is the education process for someone to exercise an opinion in a poll or exercise an opinion, a consent or whatever in a citywide referendum? You've got to have an education process there for people to even know what to put down, what to, what are the options, what do the different options mean. And so we felt there wasn't sufficient educational groundwork to propose referendum or even a poll at this point. And polls are going on. We have colleagues at University of Massachusetts who pay and buy for some survey outfit to come and do Massachusetts. So polls are going on. We can track polls about the opinions, maybe not on the specifics of what you're asking in the language of it, but we just decided survey. A survey allows some education work to go on. It allows you to offer street renaming, Sojourner Way, or this idea that has come forward, or submit your own. That's a survey, because you're gathering the information, you're gathering the ideas, the input of the community. And so once you've laid that ground, the surveys are happening, and you've started an educational process around what this can all mean, then we think down the line, but we didn't recommend that, trying to buy polling data of Amherst, or even of putting it out there at some election for people to look at. Instead, we went with the survey route. I think the way I'm hearing you're talking about your survey, approaching it from that kind of harm-based, have you experienced this, or how do you feel about this inequity or that inequity, that sounds really interesting and different from some of the language we had in our survey. So very excited to hear more of your thought process in terms of the community survey.
I just want to recognize Michelle. Just want to recognize Michelle Miller, who has her hand raised.
Oh, thank you so much. Michelle, please join us.
Thank you so much, and excuse me, I have a lot going on in the background, but I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to join you briefly. I wanted to second what Dr. Shabazz was talking about just there. I think, Sarah, the way that you have outlined those questions is excellent. I think that they're really important questions to ask. And I think a survey would really get at engaging the community around those kinds of questions. I would hesitate to go to a full to go to a full referendum immediately, because what we found here in Amherst is that foundational groundwork, the education, the sort of building support in the community is really critical. And also, I wanted to add that in our case, our town council actually approved, so there are multiple ways to approve moving forward with a special act or special legislation. And in our case, the council approved, at least in theory, moving forward with that. So it's sort of like you have to look at, okay, if we do want to move forward with special legislation, we need to weigh the risks. Do you have a council right now that you think would, by majority, approve moving forward with that special legislation? And in that case, if you do, you don't need the full community referendum in that case. However, the engagement piece, as Sarah alluded to several times, is critical, and so I would recommend in that case a survey, and then getting the pulse of your council in terms of whether special legislation is the avenue that they would like to pursue. So thank you so much. And I am as we speak, working on this meeting with Alderwoman Robin Rue Simmons, and I think it would just be fantastic if we did that together, and we're thinking about it as a strategy session. And they're very, very tied into all of the various legal implications, what's happening in different communities with different initiatives. So let's definitely get that going. And thank you for your interest in doing that with us.
Hi, this is Rachel. So I have two questions. We're talking about a survey versus a poll, and I don't know what the difference is. And then my second question is, in Amherst, did you feel that the results you got from the survey that you did were what you were hoping for? Were they useful to you in doing your report?
Sure. I wasn't sure if Dr. Shabazz, we're not in the same room.
Either person.
So I think the difference between a poll, perhaps, and a survey is that the survey, you can get both quantitative and qualitative information. I think if you look at our report in the appendix, you'll find where we asked some questions and there are open-ended answers, narrative. That is really powerful, and especially when it comes to educating your community about the harms that people are experiencing as community members, as people who work and live in the town or in the city. So I think a survey, if you have the budget for that, also would be happy to make the connection between your commission and the folks we worked with at the UMass Donahue Institute. I don't think have to reinvent the wheel if you decide to pursue that avenue, and could use a lot of the framework I would bet that we used to at least get started on that. And then in terms of the response, I think we were really happy with the response. Of course, we talked about this being something that is not, that it's a living survey, so that people, it is not in a form of being a living survey right now, but we would like for it to be. And then again, that might be something that we can sort of collaborate on We're going to hopefully have a successor body put together in the next couple months, and that successor body will be going back into the community again and asking the questions again, and seeing where folks are. But I think overall, of the 500 or so responses we got, 100 of those were from people who identified as African heritage, and so I think based on the sort of direct questions we asked, and then the piece where folks could just open-ended talk about their experiences, we were very satisfied with those results. Dr. Shabazz may have a different, I think we agree on that, but he's there so he can let you know.
Thank you. He's nodding. Thanks.
Yeah, I feel like I'm the party pooper here, but I want to note that putting out something publicly like this is going to have consequences. And if there were to be the first thing out of this commission were to be something in the nature of a survey or a poll that said, do you favor direct cash payments to persons whose ancestry makes them vulnerable to or having been the victims of slavery and its aftermath, and the first thing that comes out is direct cash payments, which is the most fraught part of reparations. I think if it goes down with a large majority against it, we will always be the commission who really wants to do this, and I think that could have long-term implications, and we got to think about that before we were to go forward with something like that. In terms of the suggestion of getting a sense of the community, I think that is, whatever you call it, I think getting that sense is actually valuable. I understand certain people disagree with that, but I think it's valuable to give us some sense of the lay of the land and what we will be proposing to the City Council of Northampton. So I'm all in favor of that, but I'm not sure everyone is. But I'm really concerned about this idea of leading with cash payments and reparations and how that would be received.
Michelle wanted to respond. You may.
Yeah, hi Bill. I think, this is a really good point that's being raised, and when we were developing our survey, we talked a lot about that and how to or where to insert that question. And I think that it wasn't in the, front of our survey. It was a question that was in our survey, and I can't remember what the response was to it, but I do want to come back to Bill's point from earlier about the potential for a decision, and this is something I've given a lot of thought to with having Amherst go forward with special legislation, which is that if we were to go forward and then the court comes down and says it's not constitutional, how have we impacted the larger movement? Have we then sort of created a circumstance where other communities are going to be less likely to step forward and begin initiatives like this? So that's why I'm really suggesting this meeting with Robin and others to strategize on how, we're working for our cities, but we're working for a larger movement. And I think thinking about that is wise, and so I just want to appreciate that comment from Bill.
I have a question for you, Michelle. Hi, it's Bill. I'd like to know whether my understanding is correct, and what you're saying here and what Professor Shabazz has been saying lead me to believe it's not. But I thought the suggestion about legislation saying that reparations was in the public interest was in order to make reparations conform to the anti-aid amendment. It wasn't so it could stand on its own, but because it would be legal under the anti-aid amendment. And I obviously haven't seen your most recent legal opinion. I really look forward to seeing it the first opportunity that council will make it available. That said, the anti-aid amendment workaround that's in the Amherst report was to make reparations in the public interest, and that's why it was proposed. It's not because legislation saying reparations is in the public interest in and of itself would stand, and I didn't think that was the proposal. I thought this was an amendment to the law, or it was an amendment to the anti-aid amendment, which is discussed at length in this appendix to the Amherst report, and if I'm wrong about that, I'd love to be told I'm wrong.
Well, Bill, my understanding is that this relates to the public purpose rule, which is tied into the anti-aid amendment. And so by seeking special legislation, we're saying that the town of Amherst believes that reparations for its Black residents serves a public purpose. And if we were successful in getting that through the legislature, then we would be in a position to, in our community only, direct benefits to Black residents based on what we've determined in our report. Now, another strategy is that if there were enough cities throughout the state that were interested in pursuing this, then it could be brought forward in a different way that would allow any city in the Commonwealth to opt in to a reparations initiatives, basically declaring that if you've opted in, then you believe, your city believes that reparations serves a public purpose, and therefore you can direct benefits in that way. So it wouldn't, if we, let's say Amherst or Northampton pursued it, of course the more cities that were pursuing it individually, probably the more pressure there would be, and perhaps we'd be more likely to be successful. But if Amherst, like with ranked choice voting, some communities have received ranked choice voting for their cities, while others, like Amherst, have had a special legislation out there that hasn't gotten passed yet. I believe there might be a statewide effort happening for that one as well. So I think that again comes back to why I think strategizing with some other folks who, like in Boston, Cambridge, other communities, to say, you know, do we want to put forward something that would be statewide, or are we going to do individual cities until we build enough momentum to get the full Commonwealth support?
And how do you think the Constitution, the bill for a state level reparations commission would play into this?
So I think what we need to be thinking about is recommendations we want to actually make at our state legislators. The conversation I had some time back with our common state representative was that, okay, if Northampton is going to be asking for special legislation, or that's on a topic that their commission is looking at, and Amherst is asking for it, then we don't need to proceed as one, we need to proceed as many. And so and one other thing I'll say on that, so they're asking these very same questions, but we need to let them know that, hey, this community would be interested in being a part of, on whatever basis, of legislation that would support local communities to do reparative justice efforts. And the framework that I've specifically want in our strategy session with the lawyers and whatnot, and that I've asked even of the KP Law people in Amherst, the framework of the Community Preservation Act that the state of Massachusetts has. Why can't reparations be done in the same way that the Community Preservation Act, or in a way similar to how the Community Preservation Act allows communities to take part of their revenue, part of their tax dollars, and have them spent according to an approved body with certain approved guidelines, and they give that money out accordingly, and it's done. and there's no legal challenge or whatever, CPA is real for those communities that opt in. We're fully under the framework of Commonwealth law. So I just throw that out, that's even part of the framework that I hope legislation can proceed.
You know, I don't mean to sound radical here, but I love this example because when you have a majority of a particular race over the whole extent of time that a place has survived, then the default is racial preference, right? Because what you're doing is for people who live there, right? So I think we have to start acknowledging that in places like Northampton, where there has been conventionally a long-standing tiny population of minority people, then everything has been done for white people. That has been the point the whole time. And we keep masquerading population size as also objectivity, right? I'm objectively helping my city because this is how many people live here, and these are the type of people that need and pay mostly into a system. But that is a system of racial preference when a city has maintained, as Northampton has, such a stringently white community and really can't explain itself as to why.
You said it.
And so I love the Community Preservation Act as an example, and I think we really should go ahead and just talk through, just lists, and I'll go one by one, each of the first lists that we think will be approved and won't be challenged. And here, go.
I think this is an incredible conversation. I do want to acknowledge that there are some high school students that are hoping to have some time to talk.
I'm happy to acknowledge them. We have such a wealth of important things tonight.
I want him to.
Yeah, and I got to throw it in before people disappear, and I don't want people in the Zoom to. We need to take a vote about having a meeting twice a month. That's going to be at the very end because I think we just can't do everything once a month. All right, so quickly, host an annual Juneteenth National Independence Day Festival. Rename a street, avenue, or road in honor of Sojourner Truth. Commission a life skills handbook targeting 16 to 22-year-olds that will help them engage in the civic and adulthood stages that they have to move through, because if your parents weren't successful, then maybe you might not be successful in doing the sort of basic things that need to be done.
What are we doing though? I don't understand why you're listing down these things. What's happening?
We're sharing with amongst ourselves the list of things that we believe would be approved without any special legislation, things that we're amassing, and you can add things or you can contest things, but we're just moving through this list and saying it out loud. That's all.
Okay, we're not trying to make any decisions, right?
Right, that's right. This is our draft and you have access to it. The placement of placards that notate aspects of Northampton's African American history. Develop, test, and implement policies that disaggregate inhabitant data by race, and that's been a tough one for us. We really need to talk about it. It's whether or not we should ask our municipality to collect data based on race, right? So we know how black people are doing, how other people are doing. Work with PTVA to ensure access to bus stops, and this asks that the city make sure that all low-income areas have sufficient access to bus stops. Grooming vouchers for use in Northampton salons, and this was a part of. This partners with to increase or seek out grant funding to bolster homeless shelter fiscal allocation. The grooming vouchers goes with coming up with a marketing strategy to encourage black business owners to start businesses in the area, which would fill a place of need where we don't have black barbers and salon stylists at any sort of significant amount. Establish a registry of local historical materials related to the period of slavery. Native Americans are doing this right now, and museums are too. If they have things that belong to a particular Native tribe, they have to try to give it back to them, in fact. They have to at least let them know. So we just want to know, is there a registry of historical items here? Of course we have historical items. We're not asking to take them. We just want to know what's here. Hold a community event or festival about diverse cultures. Encourage, recruit, or bolster existing access to healthcare services in Northampton. Support local libraries and cultural preservation centers. Bolster grant incentives for business owners who are engaged in cultural exchange in some significant way. Encourage affordable housing resources and services. Ensure diverse educational materials available at public schools. Place portable restrooms in downtown Northampton's areas. And I feel like this is a personal favorite for mine, because dignity is a huge part of confidence. And if a person can't use the restroom when they need to use the restroom, or look at themselves to clean up their appearance, because no place here wants to let someone come and use the restroom unless they buy something, I think that's super important. And then this is probably one of the most controversial things that is on this first list, which is police and fire department, encourage police and fire departments friendly visitation to public schools, or promote friendly interactions. I don't think that's a big deal, but I think that is a big deal for parents here. They don't like that idea at all. So those were that's our list, our first list of things that we think will not have any sort of pushback from community members. We started a list for charitable giving action. This is community-driven reparative action. This is a list that we want to share with the community at large, to say these are things that you can do to get involved in reparations on your own terms.
Sarah, excuse me, I'm sorry, but we do have young people here that have been on the agenda from last month to this month. I know we didn't get this agenda that you're talking about, so all these things, I'm really glad to do this at some point, but
this is also a point that was on the agenda last month too, Marcia. So both of these things, if it came down to me deciding whether or not we should be reading these items out loud, or randomly and surely just switching gears immediately, when there are 4 items that I have to read out. So I think we should just let me finish, and then we can do what you're asking. It's 4. You know what, Marcia, you win. We're going to immediately and abruptly stop reading out the list of items that we are here to talk about, so that another item can happen, because you wanted to. That's fine.
Why do you have to be so rude about that? You knew the children were here. You know they have finals coming up.
No, I don't know they have finals. What I do know is that 6:30 was a natural stopping point to turn to something else. As I'm saying, forgive me for being rude. I apologize deeply. I truly value Jeremy and his peers. I will stop, and we will turn. I apologize for my rudeness. Jeremy, you have the floor.
I would like to nominate, well, not nominate, but if we do have to vote for speakers, acknowledge Tashana as a speaker. Tashana, if you can hear me, can you unmute?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right. Do you just want to introduce yourself, your full name, grade, and your position, at least within BSU?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Tashana Fikwe. I go to NHS, I'm a junior. I run the BSU at our school, the Black Student Union, with my friend Kendall Mangum. I'm the vice president and she's president, and Jeremy brought me here today to just see what's going on and just get more in tune with what you guys are working on.
So, yeah, I guess I'll ask a couple questions for you. So, what is your interpretation, at least, of Tashana? So Kendall was not here. She does have a presentation on regressions, especially the deal with them. She'll come. We can hold 2 meetings a week, as Sarah mentioned, or 2 meetings a month. It's hard to cram everything in one. But I guess my first question for you is, so as a student at NHS, what does reparations look like to you, or would look like?
Reparations for me at the high school level would look like having college funds of like kids of color or just the less fortunate can tap into more representation, just like not on like an equity base, but like a community base, because right now at the moment we don't really have a lot, considering that we do have a population of cultured kids at our school. Though it's a little percentage, we still have it, but we still don't get a lot of representation. More like accommodation, just more like, I know reparations in a sense could not be on like a financial basis, but sometimes it really it taps into that a lot because the community doesn't have a lot of funds in general. So I feel like just having like a backup funds that we can tap into for the kids at the school to do activities that they want to do but don't have the money for, that'd be nice to have. One more thing too, this is not really like, it's just something I have been sitting on the back of my mind, but the courses that are at my school right now with the whole budget cuts and everything, the Black History course is looking like it's going to be cut. And one of the things that I wanted to propose was like, if we're cutting this Black History course, we should add more Black history to U.S. history, because it is U.S. history. But we don't really, you only get, when you do take the course, you're only getting a little snippet of that Black history when there's a whole class and they cover the whole thing, but now it's not going to be offered. And that's what I wanted to, that's what I have right now written down. That's what I have.
Yeah, just to add to that, that is actually confirmation. I checked with union coordinator at school, Ms. Fontaine, and yes, Black history is being cut. Because actually, I was asking the teacher, Mr. Burchett, only 7 or 8 people actually signed up for Black history class, which kind of interested me, because last time when I took it in 9th grade, at least 24 people signed up for it, as this was a new course. So that is very interesting. To be fair, when it was in 9th grade, when I did sign up for it, there was an African-American teacher who was teaching the class, and that was Mr. Burchett, who was a white teacher. Unfortunately, Mr. Hart had to leave the school district. So I don't know, maybe that could have some bearing on why maybe people haven't signed up for it, but.
Yeah, I think that too. I don't know. The whole thing too with it was I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Tashana, I would actually love for you to repeat one of the things that you mentioned before. You said you think it would be really terrific to have additional college funds. I know that the city does have $300 college scholarship funds, so I just wanted to mention that as something I would love for you guys to both be tapping. At the very least, $300 is more than not having 300. But you said you would like a backup fund. What can you say a little bit more?
Right now, at the moment, I'm looking to get a lifeguarding job for the summer, and I do have a job, but it's not like I don't get paid enough to be able to enroll in the $380 classes for just the lifeguarding certification. And I was working with my school counselor, and we were basically trying to see if there was any funds that we could tap into in the school district, or like even I think it was mostly in the school district, but we're also talking with like the administrators and everything to see if there are funds that I could tap into, and we never really got anywhere with that. So I was just thinking like school funds that are like been poured into by the city, like city hall, or like just the town, that will be there if stuff like this situation arises for kids who don't have the funds to tap into, can be able to use, and that are sponsored by the school.
Tashana, I think that's really terrific, because what I'm hearing is that you would like a sort of sponsorship program for professional development at the high school level. So if a student is doing something that encourages their career development or professional development, I mean, academics, we apply for stuff too, right, all the time. Can you please help me because I want to learn something new? I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to ask of your school district to siphon some funds for that. I guess my question for you would be, would you want that to be based on racial affiliation or income affiliation, right? Because, yeah, so that's my question for you.
I think on the basis of reparations we really talk about more like of the colored, predominantly black people, or like when you bring up the topic of reparations, you're thinking of predominantly black people and pouring back into the community. But I think on a high school level, it could be on the basis of income, like income disparity, because like the way that I'm seeing it, I'm imagining it, I wouldn't want to not benefit a non-colored kid just because they're not a black kid or like a person of color and they happen to be in racial disparities. I think we could hit it on like a racial, I mean not a racial, income disparity level, but that's what comes to my mind in general when I think of like being able to have an opponents for like on a racial basis.
Yeah, and I think,
Shauna, can you talk a little bit? Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
well, I think that this begs a really important question about race, and this is why we're here. So if there are 100 white students and there's one black student at a college, at a high school, and they all apply for this sponsorship program for professional development. So 101 people apply for it, right? How, obviously the black student is always going to be the one person least likely to get it, because they're one of the 100 if we're looking at the racial demographics of it. Does that make sense? And this is a struggle that we have to really think about. Do you want to say, well, it was picked by random or by merit each year, and we just happen to never have picked that one person, which could happen, right? And then the other end of it is that if we make sure we always reserve a space every 2 or 3 years for a person of color, because they're not as likely, right, to rise to the very top because of the number disparities, isn't that part of what we're trying to struggle with right now? And I love income disparity because we can suggest that right now we wouldn't have a problem with it, right? But the next level keeps begging us to tackle the question of true reparations, which is to say, why is it wrong if you have on a metric system an obvious unlikelihood that a certain type of group will be in the running for a thing because of this? That is what we're here to talk about. So that's just what I wanted to throw out, but I think Marcia had it.
Tashana, the day that I met with you all, we talked about some of the issues that had come up at your high school, and some of the young gentlemen were talking about some of the issues for them, and you talked about some of the issues for you as young women. Can you speak to that a little bit, honey?
Yeah, the meeting that you're referring to, we were talking about like just navigating a predominantly white school as a colored kid, and some of the instances that came up were like the issues with hair, or like hair. That was a big topic. It was like the white kids just seemed so like appalled that we can have our hair in different styles, or like will suggest for us to get different styles and in like a joking way. It's mostly the boys were talking about it. I wish you were here to be able to tell it in their experience, but they were like, they'll get not picked on, but like poked to get dreads, or like to get twists, or like get like cut your hair, get waves, or like can I touch your hair? And it's just like, that's one of the things, like not this is definitely not all of them, but it's just one of the things that as a student, that as a black college student, that we have to deal with after school, when we're literally just trying to go through the day as a student and get our work done, but we have to have all this like other stuff piled on top of us. And I was in a meeting couple weeks ago, and I brought this up, but if I'm going to school, I am here as a student, and I already have the weight of being a student on my shoulders. So why do my peers have to add the weight of my race and my ethnicity also on my shoulders when I'm just trying to go through schooling like you are, but you're making it harder for me? And I think I added I wrote down a couple prompts, but I have like 3 different instances that happened to me like in this school year where when I haven't experienced a lot of racial like conflict in my 3 years going here, I've experienced more than usual this year. And off the top of my head, I can't really think of any more. Jeremy, do you remember a little bit about that meeting that we talked about?
Yes. Specifically for me, I remember we're talking about hair. Specifically in the locker rooms of JFK Middle School. Specifically, I remember, well, I didn't really know it was a microaggression then, until I went to my parents, and they were like, "Oh, you were just microaggression." But they would continually ask to like touch my hair, and, touch it like, "Oh, it's so fluffy, oh, it's so soft," continually with the locker rooms. And I had no idea that was microaggression until, of course, I went to my parents, and they were like, "You were just microaggression." But there are many instances of that I've heard within the school system, and it's completely, unregulated. There's no, then teachers don't also know then what a microaggression is and don't really know how to counter it, and it's.
I think we were talking about too. It just came back to the front of my brain. We were talking about like our dialect and how the white kids will basically kind of give us a hard time for the way we speak, but then when they go off and speak with their friends, it's deemed as, oh, he looks cool because he's using AAVE in Ebonics. But when we use it, it's the complete opposite. And that's a big thing also. Like through the school and like our friend groups and considering the younger generation, we use a lot of terms and sayings that people don't realize are directly AAVE and Ebonics, and it's a place of contention because when we outright come and say this in like or use it in a conversation, it's kind of in brush off, and it's like you're using these terms but you don't know the origin.
And I think Felicia's hand's been up.
Thank you. First and foremost, I just want to say that I appreciate y'all sharing your experiences because one, that's really hard. It's vulnerable, and I really appreciate that. The second piece is I work for an organization called Think Again Training and Consulting, doing training around specific things like this, and I want to echo Dr. Patterson's idea around funding for professional development and training. There are opportunities, and I myself have done this and could make myself available, but thinking about your experiences and having trainings specifically on microaggressions, recognizing and responding to microaggressions, because a lot of times people don't know how to. Some people, right, intentionally or unintentionally, don't know that they're doing it, or they do and they just don't care. And so I wonder if you've had the opportunity for something like that or some trainings. I wonder even if BSU themselves could, start within their organization and just having conversations and thinking about affinity groups, right? Because affinity groups can be safe spaces for folks, particularly from marginalized groups or who feel marginalized, to have a supportive place where they're not going to be judged, or people are, hopefully they're not going to be judged, but more of folks that share the same identities that can have those conversations, but then branching out and having larger conversations or training specifically around things like that. And your perfect example around hair, right? Of like, some people think, oh, it's a cool thing to do, or it's trendy, and or they might think like, think it's like unharmful to say, can I touch your hair because I think it's cool, like all those kind of things, which there's a whole lot of backlash with that, right? And so I'm wondering if you've had the opportunity or had anyone come in or had maybe supportive folks like teachers. Now I'm like looking at your things.
me and Kendall, the creators of BSU, we hosted a professional PD day for all the teachers in our school, and we basically talked about microaggressions and how to deal with racial insensitivity at a PWI. And it was an amazing experience, because it's like I've heard so many things from the teachers, like we've had people come in and do this, but having the people who it happened to directly, like it was really impactful for them, because they're getting it from the source, instead of having someone come in and kind of like talk for us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we definitely got the time to do that, and in the future we plan to do another one, just because we worked with this group at UMass called the White Allyship to Action, and they really helped us a lot. But it was, for the first time, it was good, but it was like just a little bit all over the place. So we hope to come back again and do something like that, because it's very rampant in NHS, like the kind of ignorance to like the Black culture, or like just anything that's not white. So.
Yeah, I love that. I'm an alum of UMass, so I'm gonna say I'm grateful to hear that they're partnered with you. And I wonder also, we talked a lot about Smith College, and I wonder if there's opportunities to even partner with Smith College students, or if they have a BSU, to be able to do that. And I also want to share that it shouldn't fall on the shoulders of students, particularly students of marginalized groups. And so I love the fact that you all did that and put yourselves out there, and I know how hard that is to put yourself out there. And so with the help of others or folks, or even allies, right, to be able to have that conversation can be really valuable as well. I, again, want to just thank you for taking the time to be here and to share your stories.
Of course.
Maritha Wallace?
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to recognize our second speaker, Maritha Wallace. Could you please state your name, your job, and your occupation, and I guess where your job is?
Yes, I work at, I'm a paraprofessional at JFK Middle School in Northampton. I've been there for 9 years. For the first 4 years I was there, I was the only Black staff member there. And then a couple of years we got a Black principal. We had movement. I was also the advisor of students of color and allies. And we had several protests, and in terms of how several of the students there are now at the high school and very much activists as we speak at the high school. And one of the things that we did was we actually wrote a very good policy, which on racial, what is hate speech, and a policy that was supposed to be adapted by all of NPS. However, the ACLU got a hold of it and pretty much gutted it. So the only thing that shows up sort of kind of buried in the student handbook is that the only symbol of hate speech is considered the Confederate flag, because that was what they felt rose to the disruption of school, because we at one point had a white student union at JFK while Principal Caldwell was there. And it was actually really kind of hard to see that, to be honest with you, but we did fight against it, and it was removed, whether it was by hackers or whomever. And so I'd like to say, though, as staff, and why it's so important, Tashana, is that your name?
Yes.
Okay. Is that we've done a lot of PDs for the schools, and honestly, they're not all that great in terms of anti-racist, anti-bias policies. And what I have found works in Northampton is listening to the students. And if teachers don't have that input from their students, they don't listen. I mean, I'm a teacher. I walk in those circles every day. And we have had some very good AVAR trainers, and we've had some questionable ones. I'll just leave it at that. And one of the things is that we need to hear the students' voices, and I understand that does put a lot of pressure on you, and it shouldn't come from marginalized groups. But honestly, when you're walking down the hall and teachers say things like, well, that's another one going to prison, they say things like that. Or they'll say, well, I just don't waste my time with that student because they're not going to amount to anything anyway. They said this in my presence, and I will correct them. Or they'll hear a student use a racial slur, and they won't address it at that time, in that place, in that moment, because what they say is they don't know how. We have trained them on how to interrupt racism, homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, which is big at the middle school. People like to draw swastikas and all those kinds of things. It's very rampant there, especially where the world is today. And so what the teachers say is that it's too hard to learn one other thing. I have asked them several times to do books that are easy to understand, like a 101 course, if you will, in college, reading books like So You Want to Talk About Race. Like, if you walk in there, they will have no idea. They will have 52 concepts or 52 definitions of what racism is, and most of them think that it's one-to-one. They don't understand the concept of institutional racism and how that affects Black and brown kids. One of the things that we have in our discussion of the budget is how it will affect our Black and brown students when they get rid of interventions, because that's what's on the chopping block. So it's frustrating, and I want to say that my ninth year here, we still have no regular education teachers that are of color. Not one. I kid you not. Not one. We do have one special education teacher, Akeisha Maddox, and there are four paraprofessionals of color, and that's what we have out of 110 staff.
Okay, can you give us those numbers once more? Paraprofessionals of color?
There's four.
And then education teachers?
Educational teachers, like general ed teachers, there are none. In terms of special education, we have one teacher of color.
Okay, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. I mean, to have this information.
And before I go, I don't want to disparage my colleagues. I don't want to put them down, but I don't think that they understand their own prejudice. And I think a lot of times people don't want to hold up the proverbial mirror to look at their own work. I mean, I've had to do it. It's not pretty. I hated it, honestly. But they don't want to do that, and that takes work. It takes time. It takes dedication. And teachers are overwhelmed with the thing of learning how to do one more thing. I'm not trying to excuse their behavior, because I had some really long conversations with some teachers, some administration, that we need to do better. We react. I want to say we react in our school system. We don't educate the kids on what it means to be an upstander, how to interrupt racism, homophobia, xenophobia, whatever, when we hear it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. They say they want these things, but it's something that they're not actively trying to attain.
Thank you so much for sharing. Renika had her hand up, and then Felicia.
Yes, I actually have a question for Ms. Wallace. So first, thank you so much, really, for sharing your perspective. I did want to ask, when the colleagues when your colleagues make disparaging comments about Black students, is there any type of reprimand? Or is it just brushed off? Especially considering that saying, like, I'm not going to teach that one because it's a waste of time, knowing that middle school sets the foundation for high school, and the classes that you take in high school set the foundation for AP courses, and so on and so forth, that it's a snowball effect. So I wanted to know if there's, like, any type of, like, reprimand, meeting, anything for that instructor.
You actively go to the principal to have these things negotiated or looked at. They don't. A lot of times I get the information secondhand. So it's not, I get it secondhand. I can't prove or disprove that they said it. Sometimes it's during meetings. I have had direct contact with teachers because in our administration, we don't have consequences for saying things. They read modules and show videos to educate the students about why you shouldn't draw swastikas or say the N-word or whatever the problem is. We don't have a good policy, number one, for how to deal with teachers who make disparaging remarks. When I have told the principal, she has said things to me like, well, you should handle that. Or she'll say things like, well, what do you want me to do about that? The only formal way that we can actually do that is to file a grievance. And I have filed several. But we have no active policy in effect about when we hear these things and what it looks like. There isn't like, if the teacher says this, you should do this. Sometimes we do. I will report them or I will speak to that teacher. But even when the reporting happens, it doesn't go through very well. And I didn't get the rest of your question. I'm sorry, I don't remember it.
No, that pretty much answers what my question about if there's no repercussions for them, then there's pretty much no reason for them to change their behavior.
And in fact, many people who have told me this, what they do is they'll get information, they'll tell me, and they'll expect me to go and tell the administration. They don't take it on their own. I'm like, well, didn't you feel like that was uncomfortable to you? They're like, yeah, but I didn't know how to stop it. And I'm like, say, knock it off. But they don't, they have no idea. And we train them on how to do this. I myself have offered how to interrupt racism. What is racism? Your basic 101 course. It was offered after school because we can't make them mandatory, these trainings mandatory. And a couple of my allies, we offered it and nobody came because they think they've got it all. They're all good. So I don't know that training would help because honestly, the teachers think they know all about this, the microaggressions and this and that. And what do you do when someone grabs and touches somebody else's hair? I mean, they don't know.
Alicia?
Yeah, this was also for Maritha Wallace too. But I hear you saying that trainings don't work. I just wanted to offer, one, I wanted to see if I could get your contact information and send you some information. And wanted to share that our organization does an anti-racist development group for white leaders, and many people that in the space know about this because we offer these as cohorts, as 8-week cohorts for white executives, managers, and other leaders such as teachers and professionals to move to the next level. And it's a safer space, I guess, for white folks to have conversations with other white folks by addressing, how their leadership work and their experiences and behaviors patterns are rooted in oppressive systems. And so I just wanted to send you some information because we have an upcoming cohort coming July 3rd. And there's a registration available, and so I wanted to share some of that information. And specifically, if you have, your white colleagues, just send it to them, or it sounds like your principal is a man of color who also might encourage some of the.
No, he's not there anymore. Which
oh no!
The district. How can I with this. They didn't like him, and yep, they really did push him out because his ideas were a little bit too radical, I think, for a town that is not ready to be radicalized. How's that?
That's a nice way of putting it. I don't know if I can get your information through Jeremy or who
I have Mr. Wallace's number and the email. So
okay, so Jeremy, I'll offline I'll email you so that we're not taking up more time. And I again appreciate all of you sharing, and I will share some information that may or may not be helpful for folks that want to take the plunge.
And this is Rachel. I just wanted to thank you so much. This was such a fascinating conversation, and all three of you who participated, it really enriched our thinking here. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to add off the conversation that you were going back and forth about. I think the teachings aren't really helpful because the teachers aren't getting any punishment for what they're doing. I think it's like it's been a rigorous back and forth about bringing them for these teachings, showing them these setup videos or giving them handbooks and this and yada yada yada, and they think that they have it and know it all. But I think it's because we're not doing anything to basically give them in the nicest way possible punishments for what they do, and so it just keeps going and it keeps repeating itself because from what I've experienced, a lot of the time they don't give the teachers any kind of like backlash for what they do, and I think it's because they're since there's not so much kids that look like me or any kids of color, they're just not gonna worry about it because there's not as much. The predominant and the in charge is white. Like that's the basis. That's what Northampton is. It's white. So with the lack of, they basically just lack the tools for those kind of people.
And I just want to let you know that you guys are really doing a lot of that work by talking to us about it and giving us an opportunity to share in expressing our sympathies, because that's a really tough working environment to be in, and also to encourage you to know that this is what we're here to do as intelligent people, is to just keep pushing back against what doesn't work and to try to find a better way of operating as a society. I was hoping that we could talk about whether or not we can meet twice a month, or we want to start doing that maybe in August, or if that's something that we want to do.
Are we going to say?
I mean, because I know we have subgroups, and so it might turn out that people are already meeting twice a month anyway. So we can keep this going until July, and then maybe in July we'll ask the question more fundamentally. Okay. I'd like to open the floor to public comment. If anyone wants to comment on our conversations or directions for us in the future, you got a benefit of hearing us talk for an hour or 2 hours. So.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
How does the conversation go when you bring up the fact that there were land lotteries, that white people got land, and there was manifest destiny where. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't want to make, I really appreciate the point of my name's Susan Montgomery. I'm new in the community. I turned it off. Now, thanks. So I'm new in the community, but I'm very dedicated to reparations and racial and social justice. And just wondering how the conversation goes when you're looking at reparations, and that reparations have been made in our history with enslavers who got funding. I'm not that clear on exactly what they got, but I do know that there was land lotteries where my ancestors actually benefited from that, and then there was manifest destiny out west where people were given land. And so the fact that we say this country doesn't allow for people to receive help just doesn't really hold water when you look at how white people have benefited, and also the military bill after the Second World War. I can't think of what that name of that is right now, but anyway, so I just wanted to put that out there, and then I really appreciated the Community Preservation Act idea around having a certain percentage of taxes go towards reparations. I turn this off? Or?
You can leave it on. Alexis R., you are acknowledged.
Hi, thank you. So I actually was in the Amherst Reparations Assembly, and I have a lot of feelings about symbolic things. I'm really for things that change legislation, and as well as things that don't require the special legislation. Some of the things that have been brought up are, for example, defamation suits. Someone was saying that our government has a way of teaching everyone Black people's place in society, and so walking down the street, going to a dealership to buy a car, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that kind of radical aspect. There's also suing for lost wages, property monies, the same sort of thing that happened for slave owners when they received reparations for their loss of quote-unquote property. And then policing. Honestly, even if we were to give Black folks direct deposits, what brings that money right out of their pockets, right? Policing is one of them. And so we have to have some sort of changing in the way that we police folks and the way that, we allow money to be funding these violences against very particular people. And I think it even goes back to what you were talking about, okay, when we do have 100 white students versus 1 Black student who's applying for this thing, I think that that's where equity comes in, right? We have to sort of determine how heavy does a Black vote weigh in relation to demographic size. And then also getting to what you were saying about dignity, right? Black residents have the right to the pursuit of happiness and self-determination, and what can be built in the community, or what do we have to do in order to make this community prioritize the happiness of its residents, and what are those factors? So we were talking about education, right? And Black history as American history, I think that's amazing, and having that be mandatory, and having this cultural competency that not only prepares white children for the world, reduces micro and macro aggressions, but also ensuring that teachers have to be qualified in order to teach this. And Ms. Wallace was saying, right, they have to, if they can't demonstrate their training, are they fit for the job? And so the anti-racism policies in the schools, if a hate crime is a felony, then we have to treat it as one within the school, and make the consequences fitting and consistent. The biggest pitfall, right, is that all of this falls on someone who can identify these harms and rule them as such. This is the biggest pitfall of basic human rights, because those in power get to decide who is human and who is not. And so really I feel like all of this, for me, has sort of culminated in a push for consistency and compensation for the lack of consistency. And at the end of the day, legislation and movements created for Black rights and liberation inevitably do and will benefit the rest of the community, because rights don't trickle down. So I think, all of this ends up being something that benefits the entire community, as long as, there's ways that we can make it not directly a Black thing while still making it a Black thing.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Andrea Reber, you're acknowledged.
This has been a great meeting, and I just wanted to ask or say that what I heard from the kids at the school and from Ms. Wallace at the school is so important. And my understanding is that you're mainly going to use statistics from databases to make the case for the need for reparations in Northampton. But I think there should be a way to use these comments that are they're anonymous, but they're very real in terms of what the experience of Black teachers and Black students in our public schools is. So I wanted to put in a word for how to, I don't know how to do that, but it can be done? Is that what you said?
We are recording these, so I would be interested in maybe at the next meeting finding out more about what we can do with these recordings.
Right. I mean, so we talked about using a poll to get public data back, right? And we'll have an opportunity to analyze that. Then we'll decide what goes into the report as a published document. That's what we've been saying. So we will have an opportunity to hear. And this does get recorded, and we can, in our sections based on like time range, for example, we can cite, which, mind you, it has already been mentioned in the resolution that Northampton School District needs concerted attention when it comes to racial equality. So it did come up in our resolution. We will make that same case that issues of the use of the Confederate flag, known use of hate speech and slurs have occurred and have been documented in various ways. That kind of work will show up. We've been talking a lot about how to protect the identity of people who speak.
Yeah.
And we don't need to put Tashana's name next to it.
No.
Right.
No.
Yeah, I'm just using a very, like, a obvious example of what I mean by protecting people.
Mm-hmm.
But I will put that on the agenda. The survey, more talk about survey, poll, referendum, and we will definitely have the qualitative piece in our survey once it does get disseminated.
And the comments that teachers have been overheard making, the racialized comments.
Parents, as a parent, how would you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every statement that's made. No, I mean, I think that every statement that's been made and all the information we've gathered, we will synthesize and present and have appendix for elements and, that we feel like would be valuable to the mayor and to the city council, So I think that everything's on the table. So.
Great. Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you to everybody. Carolyn, you will be our last public speaker. You're muted. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. What a terrific meeting. Oh my goodness. It just really raised my spirits. But what doesn't raise my spirits is the Gazette wasn't here. And Rachel has been doing a fabulous job of sending it out to Northampton neighbors about the meeting. But really, I feel as a person who was on the committee that brought this commission, one of the ones that brought it to life, I'd like to find a way of publicizing this amazing ongoing work. When our committee began, it was right after George Floyd, and the whole country was talking about reparations. It was trending. The whole city had Black Lives Matter sign like tulips coming up in the spring. And now there's been a pulling back. Other things, have taken over, but now is when the important work is happening. Now, I do know that the Amherst Reparations Committee had a Facebook page. I don't know whether Dr. Shabazz or Michelle Miller did it, but they posted their meetings, they posted all their hearings and public events, they posted reparations-related things, and it got people engaged. And I'm sure you want people engaged, so, I don't know if that can be done unofficially. And when I think of all the people that signed the petition that wanted this commission, and I'm sure those emails are somewhere, if there were a way of reaching out to all those people and saying, hey guys, it happened, it's going on, zoom in or come in, and people may have more material to give you that you don't know about, now that you're doing the work. So that's my 2 cents. And congratulations for a really stimulating meeting.
I thought it was excellent too, and we're going to address some of the things that you all have talked about at our next meeting. Thank you so much. I hope you all will come out again, and you have a wonderful night. Is there a second for the meeting to be adjourned?
Second.
All right, can we have, I'm going to call the roll. Bill Newman?
Yes.
Alicia Lundquist?
Yes.
Jeremy Baker Paquette?
Yes.
Marissa Elkin? Oh, it's not here. Marsha Morris? Usman Power Green?
Yes.
Renika Montgomery Tomaclo?
Yes.
Sarah Lynn Patterson? Yes. Rachel Naismith?
Yes.
All right, great. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Oh. Felicia.
Yeah.
What is your